Party with your host, Dustin Rybka.
Hello and welcome to Sex Party. I'm your host, Dustin Rybka. With me on the show this week is Julia Mazur. Julia is the host of the Pretty Much Done podcast. She has also worked behind enemy lines at Tinder for 6 years. But are dating apps really the enemy? Spoiler alert, no. Just like Taylor Swift, I'm the problem. It's me. Julia and I talk about getting right with yourself first before going out and trying to force a connection or a partnership. We touch on the reality of manifestation. We talk about self-confidence, self-belief. Julia shares a life-changing experience that she had on psychedelics. That's pretty fucking incredible. This one gets a little deep, and I think you're going to fucking love it. So, without further ado, this is my conversation with Julia Mazur.
This week's conversation.
Julia Mazur, welcome to Sex Party. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, totally. I'm really excited to have you on. I think the people in the audience are like, okay, what's going on now? What's this episode about? They've seen the intro. They kind of have a sneak peek, right? But for the people who don't know who you are, they've never seen you on YouTube or heard you on your own podcast, spoiler alert. Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, well, who am I? I'm Julia Mazur. I was born and raised in LA. I, studied political science and communication studies, and I thought I was going to be a lawyer, and I pivoted for sure. I was doing the Jewish trauma thing of, do you become a doctor or a lawyer? So I decided to go get my master's degree in international marketing. And after I graduated, I got a job at Tinder where I worked for 6 years. I loved my time there. It was a crazy, chaotic time in my life, but it was an amazing job. And there I learned that I had this great passion for dating and relationships because the first time I was on a dating app platform was I was on JDate at 20 years old, and all these men were contacting me like, what are you doing on here as a 20-year-old? And I was certainly not sure what I was doing either. But through that, I dated and learned a lot, and I've been online dating for like 10 years off and on. And I have created a dating and relationships podcast now called Pretty Much Done, which I host weekly. I interview guests and experts in the field, people who have gone through traumatic breakups and seen the other side of things. I've recorded solo episodes where I divulge about my breakups and my relationships and my journey with self-love. And I think that the real mission of my podcast is for people to understand that the only way for you to be ready to find a partner and be in a relationship is to really feel secure in yourself and develop that self-discovery within yourself and love yourself. And through that, you'll be able to find your person and develop that love. And I still haven't found that, but I'm on that journey. And I hope that everyone who listens to my podcast is on that journey along with me.
Yeah, no, your podcast is really cool. And before we get to it, because I have a lot to say about it, and I think you could teach me a lot about the podcasting and I'm sort of just like this guy who I went into the wrong party. This is kind of cool. I'll hang out here and do a podcast on sex and relationships. That's how I look at myself. I'm kind of just, I don't belong here, but I'm here. I'm going to stay. What kind of, you want a double vodka tonic or, so that's where I'm at with mine. And I feel like before we get to all the good stuff about yours, you said that you worked at Tinder for 6 years. Ladies and gentlemen, we have captured someone. Everybody knows how I feel about dating apps. I'm very biased in my opinion. I'm always shouting about them. So can you break open the conspiracy or tell us any evil practices that they're running, or who do we need to send emails to stop this thing?
Okay, so I'm understanding your take on dating apps.
Yeah.
So we differ there. Although lately I have become extremely burnt out on dating apps, and I think people are really craving real life connections. I used to tell everyone that I thought, and a lot of the reason why I enjoy working at Tinder when I did is because, dating apps connect people who wouldn't have met otherwise. I remember I managed some inboxes where we would talk to people and people would say, this was like my next door neighbor growing up. We moved to different countries. We then started living in the same city, and I connected with this person who I never would have connected with. It was like a next door neighbor, and we're married and having kids now. So stories like that were really crazy to me. And like people had there were kidney donations that happened through Tinder. It's like amazing what social media in general can do, and dating apps. I don't think that there was anything nefarious going on. I think that dating is an industry that people are monetizing on, and like maybe that's where you feel negatively, or there are those biases because people are profiting off of this. I don't think that Tinder is telling people that they're bad for being single, but I understand that dating apps have gamified the process, which becomes extremely exhausting, and you start becoming addicted to the reward of getting a like or getting a match. And we have started to develop into this mindset of like there's better around the corner. But if you think about a bar, like if you're at a bar, the same thing happens too. Like you're at a bar and you're like, this guy's cute. Maybe there's another cuter guy. I'm not so into this person. Let me go do some laps around the bar, and maybe there's someone cuter around there. So I don't think they're all bad, but I do understand people are just burnt out. And I'm sure that the pandemic kind of didn't help the situation of us craving those in real life connections.
Do you really think, okay, so have you or anyone been sitting in a bar, a guy approaches you like, hey, let me buy you a drink. And like, he's like off to your left, right? Buys you a drink, sits down, and you're like, this guy's kind of cute, but like, let me get up and actually physically walk around and see if there's anybody cuter. Have you ever done that?
I don't know that I've done that, but I've definitely thought like, I don't know, this conversation's kind of going nowhere. Mm-hmm. Maybe let me move on to the next.
Yeah, no, totally. There was just a bit of my fucking sarcasm there, but no,
That's
I mean,
okay.
so the real story. Well, my cover story is this: if Tinder and Bumble and Hinge really wanted to like link everybody up and it's a happier world, right? They'd be out of business. So, right? I just noticed. I would say 2017, 2018. 2019 all the way up until 2020, I was always getting a ton of matches. I was like, wow, I have so many matches. I don't know what to do with all of these matches. Great, right? And then 2020 and beyond, what the fuck is happening? I'm not getting any matches, right? So I'm like, something must have changed, and those bastards and da-da-da-da-da, right? But the real story, I'll give it to you in this episode.
Tell me.
Is that I just suck on dating apps. Like, I'm just terrible. My pictures aren't that great. That whole time I was on dating apps, these last few years, at least, I was extremely avoidant. So it was one of those kinds of things. And so the true story, the real story is it's on me, because you can, it's how you use it, right? It's how you use. I get frustrated all the time with social media, with dating, with everything. And so truly though, I like to take some fucking responsibility for once. Like it's my fault. Which I think maybe people don't do enough of. I don't know.
Yeah, so totally. I think the real issue isn't that people are, these dating apps are trying to be profitable, like, which they are. There is that issue, but I think people are just really bad at like dating. I think like we all don't know what we want. Like, I think for so long I was saying I wanted a really great partner, things that I saw in movies. Like I said that I wanted that, but I wasn't emotionally ready or available either. It took like a lot of self-work and like me cracking myself open to being vulnerable and willing to put in the work to be like, no, I really want to be soft and open up to someone and give my heart to someone. I had this like hardened shell, but I kept saying that I wanted this amazing fairy tale romance, but I wasn't there at all. And if I would see someone's profile say like, I'm looking for a serious relationship, I'd be like, ew, cringe. Like, why would you put that on there? That's so thirsty and weird.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how I was. And then I would match with someone, and the thing that they would right away, it would be so what are you looking for? And I was like, oh no, not that question. You know what I mean? Call an ambulance, and not in a good way. And it would drive me nuts. And I would say, well, I don't know, or gee, can we have a drink first or whatever? And they'd be like, see you later. And they would like disconnect like right away. It kept happening over and over and over again. And I'm in a relationship now and all that. So I haven't been on a dating app. So maybe that's sort of changed a little bit now. I don't know. You're still out there. I feel like, maybe now that we're a little more removed from COVID, people are like horny and wanting to party again or whatever it is. I mean, it feels like it here in Chicago. I don't know what it's like where you're at, but I mean, who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's really like a case by case basis. I think that I think I've evolved so much on my like spiritual journey. I think a few years ago I was partying and out of COVID, like I was 20 in 2021 or sorry, 2022, I was going out all the time, not on the dating apps and like literally not ready. And COVID, like I got COVID because I was going out so much. And then I got into a relationship. Like I like needed life to slow me down. And now I've been doing a lot of therapy and self-work, and I manifest all the time, and I journal and I read on Friday nights. Like I've become a different human, and I want a soft relationship, but I also know my value and I have like higher standards for myself. I really think it's like where you're at in your life. And I think if you go on TikTok, like there's so much pressure and so much noise about dating and relationships. And I think people need to like slow down and ask themselves, like, do I really want a relationship? Because that work that people talk about, like there is real work. It's like work on yourself and work on how to be a partner. I'm sure like you face it in your partnership too.
Yeah, no, I mean, and the thing is, you said something really incredible about at least starting the journey to get to know yourself and like cracking yourself open, like figuring out what you want. That is really fucking hard. That's like a lifetime of stuff. And I think people, would be quick to say, well, I don't know who I am. I'm not going to date. And they would take that way out, right? Because I got to figure myself out. I don't think you ultimately ever do. It's an ongoing thing. But if you could like sort of expand more on maybe what you've done to kind of like figure and why too, because I think there's probably a ton of people listening to this that are like, fuck, that makes sense, but how do I do it?
Sure. Yeah. It's a topic I talk about often. I love to talk about it. So happy that you asked. I don't know how much time you have, but I'm here to tell you.
Go for
it. So I got into therapy because in 2020, I got into a super toxic relationship. And because I was so focused on finding a partner to make me complete, this guy was like the good on paper guy. He owned a house and was successful and what I thought loved me very much. He showed that through like lavish gifts and all of that. And I was trying so hard to make this relationship work that our last ditch attempt after fighting all the time was couples therapy. It's just like something to cross off the list. And we went to couples sessions and I just like finally got the courage to leave. And I really loved this therapist because I just like bonded with her and thought she was so cool. And I was like, hey, do you mind if I keep seeing you? Because my partner at the time was not going to see her. And he was just, doing the therapy to say he did it. And for a year, I was seeing her. And I think we were like doing some work and some exploration, but like I wasn't diving deep, as I mentioned. Like I was partying and going out and it was kind of surface level. And I think that people are afraid to face themselves, like you mentioned, because you're scared of what's on the other side. But I decided that when I got into my previous relationship, the second one, I was with someone who had done a lot of work on themselves and he was really spiritual and he had gone to therapy, been to therapy. And now I realize nothing is a coincidence. I realize that everything happens for a reason. And I was meant to date him because he gave me the safety and security to feel like I could explore versions of myself too and go deeper in therapy. And so I started to go deeper and my therapist introduced me to plant medicine. Some people call it like ayahuasca. There are some people take mushrooms. And if you know me, like I'm a huge control freak. I've never dabbled really with substances, like smoked weed when I was 15, hated it, like very much not my jam, but I trusted her so implicitly that I decided to dip my toe because I really wanted to like I wanted to just like change my patterns and behaviors, especially with men. And so I went to this journey, and growing up, I was always extremely overweight. So at my heaviest, I weighed 208 pounds. I lost 70 pounds. And I've had some traumatic moments with men and my weight. Like I've had men tell me that they wish my body looked different. I had a partner's mom call me to tell me that if I had lost weight, I'd still be with her son. Just these awful, like traumatic moments. And so I went, yeah. Deep sigh. It's okay. We forgive them.
Getting angry and like sick at the same time. It's crazy.
Yeah, but I believe everything happens for a reason. And now I understand like my mission is to help young women with confidence. And that those moments said a lot more about those people and how they feel about themselves than how I was. So I go do this journey, and you take like a couple doses. The substance is called Kana. It's like, if you Google it, it says it's like nature's Molly. It's like a plant found in South Africa. And they encourage you to do something called mirror work when you're on the substance, which is that you go into the mirror and just see what comes up for you. So this was like towards the end of the evening, and I go into the mirror and I look in the mirror and I see 208-pound Julia crying. And immediately I have to throw up, and I just like keep having to throw up, and I keep looking in the mirror and she's crying. And I finally have this moment where I'm like, oh my God, like I am throwing up all the negativity and toxicity I've told myself over the years about myself and my value. And I need to just look in the mirror and tell myself I love myself. And so I do that. And as soon as I do it, the reflection staring back at me smiles. And I'm just like, wow, like basically the key to unlocking so much for me is just to love myself. And like, that is really it. That's like at the root of everything. And I've been getting in my own way, hating myself for so long. And how can you have, I kept trying to find men to be partnered with, like, how did I expect to find a man to love me if like the closest person to me, myself, didn't love myself? And I realized that I was just looking to fill a void.
Julia, that is fucking incredible. And like, I had a little bit of goosebumps go up my right arm, which is always a good sign, right? I cannot think of any other time on the show that has happened. And that's insanely beautiful. And congratulations. And I like seriously appreciate you sharing that, because what the hell? Wow, tons of questions. So from there, after that insanely profound experience, when you come down, right, and you come back into at least this version of reality, right?
Yeah.
What did that feel like after having that experience?
Yeah, I mean, it like some like immediate reactions and moments I had is like when I came back to reality, I unfollowed the Kardashians because like I realized that they were giving me like an unhealthy beauty standard, and I was spending a lot of time comparing myself. It took me quite some time. I don't remember when I did my first plant medicine journey, but a few months like thereafter, I think I started to like call into question a lot of things in my life. I launched my podcast because I felt very compelled to like tell my story and be vulnerable with people, because I realized that so many young people have these same insecurities. And I do think that so many of us with dating are looking to fill those voids. And I think so much of our contentment in relationships stems from ourselves. So like that for sure, I felt very clear on that purpose. And then I examined the relationship that I was in, and it took me a couple months. Like, as any like large decision, it takes you a while to kind of wrap your mind around. But I realized that, again, I think I like found a partner to like fill a little bit of a void. And so I broke up with him in October and just got really intentional on learning how to be alone and being okay being alone, because for so long I don't know about you, but like I would get a high from like seeing like maybe Alex texting me, you know, like those like random numbers that you exchange and you're just like so excited, or like, I don't know, a guy who's flirted with you a couple times liking your Instagram photo, just these silly things that like really don't matter in the grand scheme of things. And I just have been on this like really intentional journey of not using like dating or relationships are meant to fill a certain void in myself, and figuring out what the things that bring me joy are. And like, I'm turning 30 in September, and I'm like, maybe I want to go do like an Eat, Pray, Love trip to Bali. Like, maybe that's what I want to do now. I want to join like a spiritual community. Like, it's more intentional stuff like that than like going to the bars and meeting a new guy to text with for 2 months.
Yeah, and when you have any sort of realization, it doesn't matter how small, how big, like any sort of like, oh wow, that feels good. That is who I am, and it's kind of with you. When you then do go to the bar, and you're not really concerned with like who's buying me a drink tonight, right, or whatever. You're just there because you're like, you want to rip a shot or two, and like maybe watch the fucking, you know, game or the band or whatever, and you're just there for your own shit. It feels so much different. And what's weird about that is, and we've come across this on the show a lot, and I love this because it's a little mysterious and fun. But it's like the second you are like in your own stuff and caring about yourself and not giving a shit about everyone else, that's when everybody comes to you. It's like, hey, can I buy you a drink? You want to, you know, which is insane. I don't know if you have any insight on that, but like, you're so right to feel that when you start kind of repairing, taking care of yourself, all of a sudden it's almost like the rest of the world notices like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah. So I like have obviously interviewed so many people on my podcast, and like someone that I interviewed talked about how like the highest vibration is love, and like love attracts love. And so if you just like vibrate that love and feel really good inside, that attracts love and opportunities your way. That's not to say that I don't have days where I'm like, shit, I'm doing all the work. Like, I am sitting here on a Friday night on my couch, like reading a book, and I've just journaled and manifested. And where the hell is he? Like, trust me, I have those like days of doubt, but I just have to keep reminding myself, like, the universe has a plan, as it has and all along. And like, the way that I kind of reframe it in my mind is like, all the things that I've already accomplished, I like focus on that. And I know how capable I am to have accomplished those things, that I know that the things that I want, like a partner, a family, a happy life, like a great career, like those things will come because I've accomplished other things that I've wanted in the past. And I just have to believe in the timing of life.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing. And if it sounds woo woo to anybody, I'm Mr. like, skeptic on everything. But you're right. There is something to the idea of believing in yourself. There's nothing fucking woo woo about that. There's nothing fucking crazy about like, and that's all sort of, to me, doing the show for over a year now, all of that stuff is the same. It's just how you view it, how you see it, how you allow it to. There is something to totally believing in yourself and not fucking giving a shit, right? And watching everybody else like come to bearing gifts to try to whatever. Like, it just seems to work when you have that core. It sort of radiates whether you know it is or not, which is great. And, you know, you really don't notice a lot of the negative stuff because you're not concerned with it. So that plays a big factor too. You mentioned therapy. You mentioned plant medicine. We love both. Never done the second one. We do have a lot in common though, because like if I smoke weed, I will like lock myself like inside of some janitorial closet down the hall in this apartment. Like I flip out. So I can't do that. I wanted to try like ketamine therapy because I have a super it's like high functioning anxiety that's just terrible all the time. Mm-hmm. So like whatever. So you've done those two things. You spoke about how much they helped you, but let's say like someone's listening and they're like, damn, Julia, okay, I hear this story. I see a lot of similarities, as I do personally. And they are like, but I don't know if I'm ready for that, or I don't know if I can get myself to therapy. I don't know. Da, 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 da. Can you give like some small little baby step tips on like how someone can like crack themselves open and like, you know, start to have these realizations where they can go and like say, fuck it and have a drink and care about themselves and not everybody else?
Yeah, totally. And I realized that I've become really woo-woo, and like, trust me, if you talked to me 3 years ago, I would laugh at you because I was like number one sarcastic girl. I was extremely skeptical. I think I was like completely atheist. Like, like if you know who Bill Maher is, like I was him. Like that's just like who I was. I was totally that person, but I have decided to soften myself, and like I call it the universe. You can call it like whatever you want to call it. Some people call it God, some people call it energy. Whatever it works for you, works for you. But I think for me, the first easiest thing that I did that helped me exponentially was journaling. I think that it is so incredible for so many reasons. First of all, like you mentioned, I also struggle from anxiety, and so much of that anxiety is these thoughts bubbled up inside of me. So like I'll like be thinking of like my to-do list or my checklist for the day, and like that like just replaying in your mind is fucking exhausting. And writing it on a paper somehow almost feels like you released yourself of it instead of having to just think about it over and over again. So the same happens for like thoughts or ruminations. Like, oh, I feel really bummed out that he didn't text me today. It sucks that I feel bummed out about it. It's really weird because I had this fight with my girlfriend and I don't know how I feel, and you like you write all this stuff out, and it almost like feels like it no longer festers inside of you. And another reason why I love journaling is because you can go and it is like a gauge for you. Like sometimes I'll read my entries from a year ago and I'm like, oh my God, that's so crazy. Like you were battling this issue and like, look at you like, I don't know. I like wrote some frustrations about my relationship and I was like, I don't know if this person's the one for me. I'm kind of confused. I'm just not sure. I feel anxious. And now I'm like, wow, you got out of that relationship. You've worked on this yourself. Like, look at all the things that you've done. And it's like a really, really cool perspective shift for you to remember like the progress. Cause I feel like we're so hard on ourselves and feel like we haven't gotten anywhere, especially with like dating. You're like, oh, like, I'm not finding that person. But it's like, but a year ago you were entertaining someone who was wrong for you. So look at you go,
Yeah, I think that's giant, and people will hear that and think, oh, well, and listen, I don't think you're talking about, morning pages every single. It's just to maybe you can do it in your phone. I mean, because I have like really shitty handwriting, so like I'd be like,
totally.
what does this say? Like whatever, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't even be able to read the date if I used my hand to write stuff. So like in your phone, I think there's like a ton of apps that are great for that, where you can like voice it too. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, my therapist actually says to do it with voice, but I'm like, I don't know that I want to hear my voice that much. But yeah, you can.
Yeah. And then staying on the topic of therapy too, like if people are scared of therapy, I get it, right? You get it. You've been there, right? I've been there. But what would be your tips if you want to have a better relationship with yourself and then with others? What would be your tips to sort of like, again, like ease into the therapist DMs,
Yeah, I get that. Well, first and foremost, I think I got really lucky because I loved the therapist I saw. But I think that it's so important to find a therapist that you vibe with. So if your first session, you don't vibe with the therapist, don't even waste your time. On to the next. It's like dating, right? Like, don't settle for just a whatever therapist. I know that sounds daunting to be like, I have to go tell my story to a bunch of people, but like, I'm on the other side of how much therapy has helped me. This is like finding a great trainer. Like you wouldn't want to find a shitty trainer and pay a shitty trainer to, not do the work that you want to do. Like really take it seriously. And then I remember Lindsay Metzler, the host of We Met at Acme, I remember she did like an Instagram Q&A and someone had asked her a question about therapy and like how to like game it or like, how to make it work for you. And she was like, you have to be really honest. And there are moments where I don't want to be honest about the one night stand that I had to my therapist, or I don't know, the like bender of a weekend or the thoughts that like ruminate in my head. But I know that that's the only way that I'm going to get the most out of this relationship. And that person, by the way, like that person has definitely seen worse than you. Like you are not their toughest client. So just know that they've heard it all and it's a judgment-free zone. And the only way that you're going to get like a lot out of it is by being completely honest.
Yeah, I know that's great. And you can just spin the therapist wheel, like with some of the, again, with some of these apps at home, like BetterHelp and whatever. Right. And then you don't have to get dressed and go to the office or whatever, if you're looking. And I will say from my experience with therapy, I've seen a ton of therapists, or maybe at least a handful or two, right? And, I think out of that handful or two in the last 10, 15 years, there was only one or two that really sucked. They were like, I'm like, what are you doing? Are you going to say anything? Or is it all notes? What's going on? Right. So I'm saying that to encourage people to maybe try, because I think that people will find, if they come into it with a little vulnerability and a willingness to do it, to get better, 9 times, well, we'll say 7 or 8 times out of 10, right? You're going to find somebody that's my experience, at least.
Yeah. And I think another thing is like to give yourself grace. Like if you are going in thinking, I really want to get better about my anxiety. And then, you're 5 sessions in and you're like, my anxiety hasn't gone away. Like healing's like not a linear process. Like some days are going to be shitty and some days they're not. Like there's also so many factors. Mercury's constantly in retrograde. I don't know. Like there's so much shit going on in the world that you're not always going to be 100%. And I think it's really important to give yourself grace on those days.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit briefly before we started recording about how like the last couple of years have felt like a never ending series of horror movies, and like not the ones that it's not Scream. We don't want we love Scream. We don't want to watch this. Whatever we're in now is not that. It's terrible. Like this monster keeps getting up out of the lake after we keep killing it, whether it's politics or climate change or like, abortion rights. It just keeps coming back over and over and over and over. And I think that has to play a huge factor in not only relationships with others, but relationships with self. So right into the next question, right? What have you noticed the pandemic doing to dating personally? And then as a podcast host, are there things that you're seeing that's like, wow, this really fucked us up?
Yeah. I think work from home fucked us up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I work remotely. And I think that people who weren't used to working remotely, there are people obviously who have freelanced and have been used to it, but for people who we just like took the rug right under them and we're like, now you're going to be home all the time. I know for me, it was extremely difficult. And I worked in an environment in tech where it was extremely social. The lunchroom is like where you get together with people. And now everything I do is centered around one place. I go in now once a week and I can tell that my mood is so much better. Like in the beginning of the pandemic, there were some times where I'd bring my laptop into my bed and I wouldn't like leave my bed for hours. And there were some times where like my boss would Slack me something the minute that I went to go for a walk and I just didn't go for the walk. Like it was so much harder to admit that you weren't working. Whereas like when I was at my job, if I was not responsive, it meant I was like either in a meeting or I did take a walk to get a coffee or something like that. And now it feels like we always are just so glued to our phones and our computers. And like, I don't know, like I do the laundry while I'm, working. Like it's just so crazy how that like lack of interacting with people has made us so like reclusive and weird and just so I think it's like why TikTok worked, because people started to find this portal into like funny other people and you felt less alone. But like the reality is like you're alone with your phone. Like, so I think people became pretty weird and hesitant to like interact with people and really like relying on their phones. But on the other side of the spectrum, like that also grew, there was this hunger for meeting in real life and people having that. I just think that we became awkward as a result. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that it was like an asteroid just like crashing into an already troubled village or planet or whatever, right? And I think that it made things just incredibly confusing. That's what I see and feel, right? Because I think in my experience and on this with my show, right, it just feels like everybody is kind of like on the fence. And it feels like that 2019 world that we were in where it was like, Marvel movies and going out and ripping fucking shots on like boom, it's like everything's like anything normal is just totally destroyed. And now it's sort of, you would think like, oh, it's on us. If you look at any other pandemic and whatever, there's a period of like insane chaos after the lockdowns end or whatever. But then it's like this insane period of like the 1920s, right? Like these people went through 2 years of having to mask and getting vaxxed and all of the chaos and whatever. And they actually like were arrested for not wearing masks and all that stuff. And they get to 1920, it's like, hey, it's done. Like there's a bunch of people that are dead, but like it's done. Like you can come out. And they come out and the government bans alcohol. And they went so crazy from 1920 to 1933 that they put us in the Great Depression. Like that's so like for this one, right? When I started the show, I actually had your friend Alana Dunn on, and we talked about it. We talked about, do you think this summer is going to be like a crazy fuck fest and all this stuff? And it wasn't just like about sex. It was just about like being around other people, right? For that 2.5 years, we couldn't, and everybody expected this same thing that happened in 1920. Like we're going to go crazy. It's going to be this party. We get a reward for being locked up for so long. And I think the problem is like, instead of getting any reward, we got a bunch of like really shitty, punishments almost for going through that. There hasn't been a period of like, woo, we're free, margaritas. Like it's none of that, right? Mm-hmm. It's inflation. It's more politics. It's fucking, wait a minute, they're doing what? Like all of that. It's just a continuation. Mm-hmm. So I think to sum it all up, I just think, can we get like a national week off or something? Like I think we need like, they called it the Great Reset. Okay, well, we need a real reset. We need like everybody do whatever you want and still get paid for it. Like something, there has to be something that, because times can be tough, but there's a period of like, after every major war, all this stuff, there's huge like, boom and bust bullshit, politics bullshit. But I just feel like socially, dating apps are tougher depending on whatever. Meeting people in person, because you said everyone's a recluse and a little bit weird now. That's tougher. Prices are so like, that's what I see. I mean, it just feels like we need some relief,
Yeah, as you're speaking, like for me, the thought that comes up is I think what I'm trying to explain is like we totally have become desensitized to things, and we just keep going because our attention spans are like so short, or I don't know if it's like a survival tactic or what, but like, mass shooting occurs and we're just like, okay. And then like abortion is being banned. Okay. Like it's like all this like crazy shit is happening and we just like keep moving through our day, and you scroll 10-second videos on TikTok and you watch that for a little bit on a date. You're on a date and you're not even like slowing down to be on the date and like realize if you like this person. And then you go on the app when you come home and you swipe again and find another person to do it all over again. You're just like, we're just totally, I think we need to all like slow the fuck down.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does feel, they said in 2019, the human, at least the American human attention span was 17 seconds, and now it's 4, which which is really, really bad, and it's just, I find myself like scrolling and like I'm on Instagram. For me, that's like my, drug of choice. And I'm like, I'm like liking all these like sushi pictures. And I'm like, I don't even want to be doing this right now. Why the fuck am I doing this? And, I've said it before, but like when heroin addicts shoot up, they don't do it walking across the fucking street against the light. But we do it on our phones. So like, what drug is that powerful that it's got you driving around, not looking at the road because you want, you know what I mean? Like that is some insane shit.
It must be loneliness that's driving it. It's just like the need, like if you think about being in an elevator, have you ever been in an elevator where someone didn't look down at their phone? Like, like everyone's in that elevator. Like everyone has that awkward social reflex to be like, I'm not going to stare someone in the eyes. This is so weird. So they look at their phone as a result. You're causing bigger loneliness. Maybe that person standing next to you is a cool person in the elevator. Like I'm not, but I'm just saying like we are so hesitant to be alone in awkwardness or with ourselves that like, I really think that that's what's driving it.
Yeah, and see that's the hard part. I mean, even like in my apartment building, like the last building I lived in, again, it was like 2019, whatever. You know, people were like, I knew my neighbors, right? Like they were friendly. And here it's like, hey, I'm Dustin. And they're like slamming the door, like locking and I'm like, what the fuck? But like that's a new thing too, right? Like it's just it is really kind of and where is it headed, right? Like if we're already here now, what's next? What's next? And now they want to put us in fucking goggles and shit. Like, what? I mean, what the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah. It's really sad and really scary. And I think I think we've like gotten to the root of like why dating is so hard because someone doesn't want to wait for you to say, hi, I'm Dustin, but they'll close their door and get on Hinge and meet 100 Dustins, you know, like,
yeah, like total stranger, like, I don't know this, whatever. And then they'll like try to set up, you know, like dates with these people or whatever it is. I mean, you know, I think that it just goes back to what you said, though. It's one of these things where it's like, if you don't really know why you're feeling the way you're feeling or who you are, how the fuck can you connect with someone else, right? You haven't started that. I think that's like so important. And you talk about it on your show, which, you know, here we go, like perfect transition. Okay, whatever. But like, tell me about your show. Tell me when you started it. Tell me how long you had the idea and you were fucking terrified to do it, but then you said, fuck it. What made you do that? Tell me everything.
Yeah. Well, so when I got out of my first toxic relationship, I remember that summer I was like, okay, I want to connect with people about dating. And I started creating dating TikToks. And I was like, it was like a little bit superficial at the time, but it was like judging like people's Hinge prompts or saying good Hinge prompts, or it was like saying like bars to meet cute boys. It was like, I hate when guys do this and say this. And honestly, it was doing really well. And my ex-boyfriend reached out to me and he was like, all my friends are sending me your content. It's so cringe and blah, 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 blah. And it got in my head. I mean, I was 27 at the time. I don't know. Now I'm 29. I don't know. And I got in my head and I couldn't do any more content. But now that I can see like that everything happens for a reason, I don't think I was evolved enough to create cool content that I like resonated with. I think I now understand what I want to help people with in dating. Like I want people to love themselves and not settle and have these like standards. Like I think I was just putting out fluff. And so I had some thinking about, okay, like if it is dating content, like what could it be for me? And in the pandemic, I don't know about you and your story with your podcast, but podcast made me feel less alone. I was in a super toxic relationship and I would take walks and I would listen to podcasts. And I remember I was listening to a podcast. It was Life with Mariana Hewitt, and she had Jen Atkin on. And Jen Atkin was saying that she tells all her friends that a breakup is just one weekend of moving your shit out. And it's just one weekend. And I had like this aha moment listening to that podcast. And I was like, okay, I could do that. Like that feels like easy and tangible. And then I thought to myself, like, if I could be that moment of clarity for someone else, like I'll feel so good and feel like I'm doing what I meant to do, like to show people like you shouldn't settle. So I realized I wanted to do a podcast after like ruminating on it after the TikTok mishap. And it started with being a breakup podcast. So it's called Pretty Much Done. And like the message is to be like when you're pretty much done with the relationship and you're not sure, but it's like pretty much done. And what I wanted was for people to hear other people's breakup stories, to understand that these are people who have gone through breakups and have lived, and, you know, their lives have become better. And a breakup is not the worst thing in the world. It's like, it's actually an opportunity to rebuild yourself and to figure out what you do want. And through it, and through probably my self-love journey, now the message is kind of like, figure out who you are, love yourself on all the parts of yourself. And now I have like experts on and dating coaches, like mindfulness experts, people who have their own podcasts. And I just want people to learn all those lessons about like confidence and self-love and understand that like everything happens for a reason. And we're kind of on this journey together. And I'm sure at some point it'll evolve too. Who knows, like if I'm in a relationship and what my future holds, but it's just like, let's not settle for any less than what we deserve.
Yeah, no, I mean that's so prevalent throughout at least the later episodes, because I binged like the last like 3 or 5, 15, I don't know, whatever. But I listened to a lot of them because, you know, I used to like go all the way back to the beginning, listen to someone's first episode, and then I would like listen to like the middle and then their latest. I'm like, that is such a dumb way to like get a hold of someone's mind and kind of like try to get inside of it. Cause just listen to the last couple, right? That's how I do it. And that message is clear there, that you really do have to at least like pick up the mental phone and call yourself and be like, hey, what's going on? What are we doing? How do we fix this? Because you don't really have, I don't want to say a right, but you don't really have a decent leg to stand on then going out there and like trying to like fill a void like with people. And I think a lot of the things that you tackle on your show, you're right. Like, it isn't just about breakups. When I first booked you, I'm like, okay, we're doing the breakup thing. People love the breakup thing. And then I started listening. I'm like, well, this isn't all about, this is great. You know, like, not that it wouldn't be if it was all about breakups, but it's really cool to see how that sort of evolved, right? Like, you started it about this painful, horrible thing, and now it's like this other message. Is there something specific? How long have you been doing it? How has it been a year?
No, so I launched in September, so
Okay.
6 months. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so it's okay. So half a year is still a fucking long. In podcast time, that's 10 years. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot like dog years, except it's way longer. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, it's a thing. Podcasting is a fucking thing. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's stressful. I'm sure you know, like sometimes like I was recording a bunch a few weeks ago, and then now I'm like, wait, shoot, I'm missing an episode for like when I'm on vacation. I need to book that episode. And when you're kind of scrambling in that way, you're just like, this is so scary.
You can't think about vacation until you have 25 episodes ready to go. Like, yeah, I get it. I totally get it. Can you think of something like that came up on the show or like blew your mind personally, where you're like, oh, wow, right? And then that changed how you were showing up, or that changed how you were looking at a certain thing?
Yeah. So if anyone listening wants to listen to my podcast, one of like the most amazing episodes, and it went like semi-viral for me, was the manifestation episode with Jen Mazur. She calls herself the Queen of Manifestation. And for me, like that whole episode, I was blown away. Like, I speak a lot on my podcast, but on this one, I was shut up. Like, I was not saying a word because everything she said just had my mouth, like my jaw on the floor. And she was talking about, she was telling me, like, you know, if you take a car and you're driving from Atlanta to New York City and you're driving on the highway and your exit is, you know, it's closed, your exit's closed. She's like, does that mean that New York City went away? No, that means that you had to go drive to the fruit stand, because then maybe when you drive to the fruit stand, you meet your partner who's at the fruit stand, but New York City's still there. And like that kind of like gave me such a perspective shift of like, oh my God, like I have been wanting to, like, you know, everyone wants to find love, right? Like I've been wanting to find this like amazing love, and I can't wait for it to happen. I fantasize about that moment walking down the aisle, but I guess I had to like learn and self-discover, and I had to launch a podcast about it, and I have to like feel like I'm working through that mission. And that doesn't mean that the wedding's going away and the partner's going away. It's just taking a little longer, but there's things that I need to learn before that happens. And for me, that was just like such an eye-opener. And I now am just very much like thankful and grateful for that perspective shift and like the world for operating that way.
Yeah, no, that's giant. And there's always, I always see conversations about a manifestation, go the back and forth about, man, oh, it's not real. What? Yes, it is. Like that seems to happen a lot on Instagram, and I've seen it a little bit, like, I don't know, probably like fucking Facebook or something, like someone's aunt, like, nah, it didn't happen to me. I didn't manifest it. I manifested this idiot or whatever, right? And so I always find that fascinating, because manifestation, when I think about it in my, like, you know, skeptic sort of dumbed down brain on these topics, it's, well, how much of that is like you're thinking that you want it, right? And then actually like you want it. You know what I mean? So that, to me, that's just so fascinating. And I love I love all of that stuff. So I think that's like really powerful, that the episode that we were like, oh shit, like was about manifestation.
Do you believe in it? Do you believe in manifesting?
I want to believe in manifesting. Does that count? I want to believe in everything. I want to believe in fucking in all of it. And my girlfriend, she's a dating coach. She has all sorts of awesome abilities and beliefs or whatever. And, you know, she knows that I'm not, I guess like a firm believer, right? She knows I'm a skeptic, all these things that we joke about her all the time. But like, I love that about her. And I'm fascinated. I'm like, tell me more, you know, like all the time. So I'm one of these people who like wants to believe. I think I just need like, you know, a plethora of ghosts or something to appear in front of me and or whatever it is that I'm a believer. But I mean, I've had some crazy experiences that I can't explain. So I couldn't sit here and tell you that, oh, that's all fake and da-da-da. And doing this show the last year has taught me that stuff is a lens. It's like shining light through a prism, right? There's so many different shades of light that you could never even label them with the naked eye. So what are we not seeing? And I love that. I love that approach to it. And I think it's also like there's healthy believing in manifestation, and then there's unhealthy. And I see that a lot on Instagram too, you know? I'm sure you have experiences of people who are really unhealthy with manifestation.
For sure. I think the unhealthy portions are when you manifest and then it's like, it didn't happen. And like, this stuff doesn't work. And what the hell? It's like, this isn't a surefire solution. And I actually think that you getting in your own way is exactly why it's not happening, because there's some negative energy happening there. And you gotta like fix that mentality first.
Yeah, and like we said earlier, this unexplained thing happens when you believe in yourself. Other people start to be like, this guy's having a good time. I want to know this guy. What the fuck? He's ripping shots. He doesn't care about this other. Like, who is that? Tell me more. People gravitate to you. So what's the difference, right? With manifestation, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
And anything healthy, you know, you can be, you can be like trained, like ready for the fucking marathon, and if you show up to the race after training for 2 years, you're like, I'm going to fucking lose. I'm a fucking idiot. I'm going to fucking lose. That's not going to help you. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to win this bitch. Like, whatever, that's going to help you. So
totally.
So that to me, it's not some like crazy, like witch's brew, like woo woo shit to me. To me, it's like anything that can help you feel better and achieve what you're trying to achieve, I'm all for, right? I love that stuff.
If like the word manifesting makes you uncomfortable, that's fine. Just call it whatever. Call it believing in yourself, like whatever it is.
Yeah, it doesn't. It really, really doesn't matter. But yeah, I think that would be stupid for people to be like, "That's not true. Get out of here." Whatever, you know. Fuck that.
Yeah.
So doing your show, you've done it for 6 months, and you know, I could tell even in the small portion that I sampled that there is like each episode, it almost feels like each episode you are opening up more about the things you've gone through. Like you mentioned the fucking trauma from the idiot dudes, like commenting on your weight and all that stuff. And I mean, that stuff is hard to be able to share. Again, like if there's someone out there that's like, they want to have a podcast, right? And they're like, because I did it for a long time. Like, I'm going to do this podcast. Same as you. I was like driving around the pandemic and I was like, somehow I found Call Her Daddy. And I'm like, oh, wait, what? We could talk about fucking blowjobs and cum shots and all this crazy shit. I'm like, wait a minute. And then I went through this whole thing where like, well, I'm a man though. That's going to sound weird. And I was like, it's all this negative doubt, right?
Yeah.
And I pushed and pushed and pushed and eventually like got all my shit ready to go. And then I waited another year and then I did it. You know what I mean? So, but it wasn't easy. So, and they've heard that story. They want to hear that. They want to hear your story. So what would you say to someone who wants to start a podcast and wants to be open and honest about their trauma, their asshole dudes and dudes' mothers? You should probably give me their addresses so we can put them in the show notes too. But like, what would you say to someone who just wants to push through and do a creative project?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to listen to that inner gut feeling. If that inner gut feeling is saying like I feel like I want to connect with people on a podcast, your gut's telling you all you need to know. And the self-doubt, just like we mentioned, is doing you a disservice. And I get the fears around being vulnerable. Like I talk to so many of my friends. Like I have a friend who just has the best style. She has the best style and she's about to turn 30 and I'm like, you have to be a stylist. And obviously like the way now is like through TikTok, like that's a nice way to jumpstart your career. And it's really like hard to put yourself out there because you're like, oh my God, the family friends are going to like send this around and this is embarrassing. If you don't put yourself out there, you will never receive. Like if I didn't launch this podcast, you would never have met me or reached out to me and we never would have connected and we never would have been recording this episode. But because I put myself out there and something resonated for you, we were able to connect and like what a magical thing that is.
Mm-hmm.
And that keeps happening for me. The people I'm connecting with on this podcast have like made my life more full. And I feel so solidified in my purpose. So I think that it's incredibly important that if you have this inner pulling, like put yourself out there and see how, sorry to be woo-woo, but the universe rewards you with the abundance. Like I just think that you have to do it. And don't even think about like, people always say like people are focused on themselves and they won't, they're not talking shit about you because people are so like focused on themselves. I believe people will talk shit, but like, what does it matter to like hypothesize of what people are like? You're you're getting in your own way. That's an hour of your time that you could be doing to record an episode or put a TikTok out. Fuck those people. When you're doing really well is when those people are going to be hitting you up, being like, oh my God, it's amazing that you're going to this event and that event. Can I come? Like, let that fuel you and just don't waste your energy or give people energy who don't wish you well, because that has more to do with them than it does you.
Well, okay, first of all, don't ever apologize for being woo-woo. You're welcome to be woo-woo all day long on this show. So there's that. And two, like the trick for me, I mean, I started a show called Sex Party. I was incredible. I talked to my mom 100 times, like, Mom, if you see something, and she's like, why do you keep, whatever. And so that was a thing for me for a second. And I was like, well, what about all my aunts and uncles? Because I'm just going to blast it on whatever. And I was like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm just doing it. And I did it and all of that. It was not easy, but I did. But like with the hater shit, I think a tip that's been really valuable to me is like flip it around. Like those people are choosing to take that energy and place it in your comments about you. And so what I do is I thank them for it, right? And I usually take it, screenshot it, and turn it into content because it's free content, baby. Like fucking keep hating. And so it's probably unhealthy, but now I'm at the point where I get excited when someone sends a really shitty DM the same way I would if someone was like sending a good DM. Yeah. So like I share both because I think it's fun to be transparent or whatever. It's all like you said. It's all energy, and the almighty algorithm can't tell the difference, and sometimes it prefers the shitty kind. So like let them hate. It's free publicity for your show.
Totally. Yeah. 100%. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So, okay. In closing, we're going to close this episode off. Is there one thing that you are seeing that you don't agree with, right? Like, is there something that everyone is doing in dating, that everyone is doing in relationships or with sex, right? That is like a constant at the moment that you're seeing on the show, you're seeing through your friends, through your personal experiences, that you could say, hey, this one thing or these two or three, whatever it is, are really kind of like messing us up when it comes to dating, relationships, and sex?
Yeah, I think that sometimes we go on social media and see what people's standards are for, I don't know, like someone will post and say like, this person tried to sleep with me on a first date and like that is not okay. Like these rules, right? Mm-hmm. And they try to like make them their universal truths. And I think that it's so important to figure out what rules are right for you. And I think that it's really, really easy to get caught up in like the rules that social media places. They're just guidelines. They're just guidelines like of things that work. For example, like Lindsay and Metzler and I, we disagree that you shouldn't sleep with someone on a first date. Like those things are really up to you to figure out. And I just believe that like the person you're meant to be with is the person where your like rules and values align. And sure, is it more likely that maybe a guy might ghost you if you sleep with him on the first date? Yeah, probably statistically. But if you're someone who wants to do what you want to do and you felt compelled, not because someone was pressuring you to sleep with them, but you felt compelled to sleep with them, don't beat yourself up later on for having done that. In the grand scheme of things, everything is just, it won't matter later. So just do all the things that feel right to you. And I think that's like, just listen to your gut and figure it out. And don't take there's so much noise on the internet. Like even I'm sure I contribute to it of like podcasts and things that I say. Figure out what's right for you and you'll be okay.
Do you want to take your microphone and drop it, or Julia Mazur, thank you so much for being on the show. Let's make sure we fill them in on where they can find you, where they can subscribe to the show on all the platforms. They can catch you every week.
Yeah. So episodes launch at midnight on Wednesdays. Pretty much done is the podcast. It's PMD Pod, PMD POD on TikTok and Instagram. As I mentioned, I'm trying to grow my TikTok, so follow me on both places. And thank you so much, Dustin, for having me. This was such a fun conversation.
Yeah. I mean, thank you so much for just being yourself and in that, just being fucking brave for doing all the stuff you're doing and then talking about it again and again and again, because I think that's so big, and it's not easy to talk about, you know, the weight stuff or the interpersonal stuff or like your flaws or whatever. And I just think that's what made me want to book you, is I just had that feeling. And as I dove into your stuff more, I was like, hell yeah, I was totally right. You know what I mean? So I just want to thank you for being a fucking badass and being brave and coming on the show and doing it.
Thank you. And you'll have to come on my show too, because we'll switch.
I would totally be I would be super excited.
Awesome.
Amazing. We will talk soon.
Yes.
I told you guys you were going to love it. Big thank you to Julia Mazur for being on the show. Go check out her podcast, Pretty Much Done. It's fucking awesome. If you're loving guests like Julia, if you want more guests like Julia, you want more deep conversations, more wacky conversations, there's a couple different ways you can show that need, that love, that desire for more Sex Party. If you're listening on platforms like Apple and Spotify, you can subscribe to the show. That's the most important. You can leave a rating. You can leave a review. You can tell anyone who will listen to you. Send random texts to random numbers. Listen to Sex Party. If you're watching on YouTube, I love you. I see you. You're important to me. I appreciate you. If you're watching on YouTube, you can like the video. You can leave a comment. You can subscribe to the channel. You don't have to do any of this shit. I appreciate it if you do. I love you. Reach out to me in the DMs on Instagram, because I will see you right back here next week.
Thanks for listening. The party continues next week. Click subscribe and let's make this a regular thing. Follow the show on Instagram and Twitter @SexPartyFM. Follow Dustin @Dustin Rybka.